So the truth is, it's confusing being a man today. There's a lot of outdated philosophies, a lot of contradicting messages out there, but there are some core tenets of what it means to be a man that I choose to live by. And one of those is growth. I think as a man, it's important to push yourself out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself. And that's why I recently joined an international motorcycle club called Freshline. And what Freshline does is they get groups of men together. They travel to a foreign country, they rent motorcycles, and they blaze a new trail across that country and explore it. And one of the first steps to joining Freshline is actually passing their boot camp that they have set up in Namibia, Africa, which I just got back from last week. So today I'm going to give you guys a full breakdown of the Freshline Boot Camp, give you my review of it, and if you are crazy enough to sign up for it as well, I'm going to give you my tips on how to prepare for the Freshline Boot Camp. So the boot camps are really designed for two things. First one is just to weed people out, right? The boot camps are tough and exhausting and incredibly challenging, and that's not for everybody. And just having a boot camp automatically filters out quite a bit of people. And two, to actually prepare you for these international expeditions to foreign countries that your entire group may have never been to before. Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong in these expeditions, from guys getting injured to bikes breaking down to just getting lost in the desert. And so a lot of the training and exercises at this boot camp are focused around preparing you for these different scenarios. So every morning at boot camp, you wake up 5:30, 6 o'clock, and you do PT. Our PT was led by a former Army Ranger. And I have to say, I was actually really happy with the PT. I was kind of expecting just a dumb military PT doing push-ups, sit-ups, and burpees every single day. But the PT is actually very well thought out. A lot of focus on mobility and active recovery, stretching, and just kind of warming up the body more so than anything else. We also had a beach PT session, which is just much more focused on mental toughness than physical toughness. We even spent 2 days at a farm. We didn't have any PT equipment, but what we did was found heavy shit around the farm to lift up and use as our PT, from metal fucking rods to logs to cinder blocks, like whatever you can. And it kind of drills that lesson home. Like, you don't need a gym, right? You have a heavy object, you can get a good workout in. So every morning you have PT, and then usually 3 to 6 hours of riding a day. And it is physically exhausting. I personally was not in the best of shape when I went there, and that's kind of one regret, that I wish I was in a little bit better shape before I got there, because it's just exhausting every day for me. But again, it's pushing you. It's pushing you past your physical limits, your mental limits. And had I ridden, 6 hours a day here stateside, I probably would have been like, oh, I gotta recover for a few days, and taken a few days off. But there, it's not really an option. You gotta get on your bike and you gotta go again the next day and the next day and the next day, which simulates like an actual expedition. If you're in the middle of Mongolia somewhere, there's not a town for 100 miles, you can't take a day off. You need to get on your bike and just keep on going. And so again, I feel like that really is in line preparing you for these actual expeditions. Now, we had a lot of guys there who actually never ridden dirt bikes before. A lot of people who've ridden motorcycles their whole lives and never ridden off-road. And something that I really loved, that we had a professional motocross rider that was actually instructing us for a few days and really teaching us a lot about riding off-road, the proper positions to be on the bike, the proper way to brake the bike, and how to ride in a lot of really tricky terrain. And we also got a lot of lessons on bike maintenance as well. We got kind of formal lessons on it, but over, the week and a half or so of riding, there's just a lot of stuff that breaks down. We're pretty rough on the bikes. And so we just got a lot of hands-on experience over these 2 weeks of changing tires, cleaning air filters, troubleshooting bikes. And that alone was like a really good experience. And again, like when you're on an actual expedition, like you need to know how to actually troubleshoot and fix your bike as well. So I think all of that was just really great training, for these actual expeditions. We also got some really good first aid training on this boot camp as well. Got to practice putting tourniquets on folks. We actually had a few injuries on the trip as well, and got to kind of get that real world experience troubleshooting these injuries also. We also got some really cool training from this former Army Ranger on shooting Glocks and shooting rifles as well. I don't think we necessarily need this for our expeditions, but it is still a good skill to develop and have. And a few of the days we actually did jiu-jitsu sessions for the PT, which is a lot of fun and absolutely exhausting. At one point I got to roll with a former Special Forces commando who's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and he threw me around like a fucking rag doll, and there wasn't a goddamn thing I could do about it. And that is going to haunt me. And kind of lights a fire in my ass to get back into jiu-jitsu now, so that scenario does not happen again. So I do feel like there's a lot of militaristic influence and elements that were incorporated into this boot camp, but it was not all the dumb parts of the military, it's all the cool parts of being in the military, right? I was in the Air Force for 11 years, and there wasn't like a big focus on, you know, dress and appearance and following these rules and regulations and all that annoying bureaucratic part of the military. It's just all the cool parts, right? Being put into leadership positions and working together as a team and being held accountable and challenging yourself and mission planning and preparation and training. Is all these cool elements of the military are kind of incorporated into this. You know, my understanding is that this whole boot camp was helped designed and orchestrated by a former Navy SEAL BUDS instructor. So a lot of just militaristic elements incorporated into it. And so we did get to do quite a bit of exploring on this trip as well. It wasn't all just this boot camp stuff. The entire boot camp is transitory. Like, we'd spend 2 days at one camp, travel, spend 2 days at another camp, travel, spend 2 days at another location, and so on, to really mimic a real expedition as well. And we got to see some really beautiful landscapes and some really wild terrain, and got to ride in a lot of different types of terrain as well that most of us have never ever ridden in. I've ridden dirt bikes since I was a kid. I've never ridden in some of those types of terrain that we got to explore. So for example, we had an entire day just riding on sand dunes, which is a completely different beast. If you've never ridden on sand dunes before, this sand is like a fine powder. You know, it's so fine that the wind can blow it up and create these dunes in the first place. And your bike just immediately sinks several inches down into it, and it's just a completely different experience learning how to ride in these sand dunes. But it is a lot of fucking fun and just an amazing experience as well, riding in these dunes like that. One of the most challenging terrains that we had to ride in was actually this dried out riverbed where there's a lot of these giant rocks. And it was challenging because you'd be going from this deep sand that your bike sinks into, and you have to give it a lot of gas, and then you'd hit these rocks, and suddenly your bike would fucking launch from underneath of you and get traction. And it's just rock sand, rock sand, rock sand for, you know, a couple of miles there. It is absolutely exhausting. But again, like, this is good to get this type of experience in a semi-controlled environment in case something does go wrong. And I feel like I really became a much better rider. Like, I absolutely did at the end of this boot camp than when I first got there, just from all these different experiences and just riding in all these different types of terrain. And we did get to see some really cool wildlife as well, from these African elephants to getting a few feet from wild lions in the back of this open truck, to lots of giraffes and lots of zebras and springboks and gazelles and all kinds of other animals. And we actually got to ride motorcycles through these African safaris. And they told us when we were riding, like, hey, don't stop and take any pictures. Or literally hyenas and wild lions in these parks. Like, don't stop your bike in these things for any reason. And it's just some really cool experiences being riding and seeing giraffes on the side of the road. I remember at one point there's like a whole herd of zebras that were running kind of parallel with me while I'm riding the motorcycle. And it really just got these once-in-a-lifetime experiences at this boot camp. That, you know, that kind of stuff, riding with a herd of zebras running alongside of you, you know, that kind of stuff is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. You know, one of the elements that Freshline really puts an emphasis on, which I appreciate, is community. And they're trying to not just go on motorcycle rides. They're trying to build a community of like-minded men that want to travel around the world and go on these expeditions. And there's just a big emphasis on this online community that they have that you can still tap into, even when you're stateside. But even just that community of men that I got to hang out with, those 10, 11 guys that I got to really get to know on and have this really unique experience with, that was honestly, like that was just as great of an experience as the actual writing. It's just connecting with other guys and hearing their stories and kind of going through this shared experience with them. There's just a lot of value in that. At the beginning of the video, I said how important I think it is for a man to challenge himself and push himself out of his comfort zone and be focused on growth. And I think it is also just as important for men to connect with other men and for men to have a community that they can tap into. And that's not easy to find, honestly. I had that for 11 years when I was in the Air Force, but now, I work a full-time job, I'm a single parent, and it's hard to kind of find a community like that and tap into a community. And it's hard to kind of build those connections with other men. And that's something that I personally really value, and I really appreciate that they value that as well. Alright, so you're crazy enough to actually sign up for one of these boot camps. Here are my tips for going to the Freshline Boot Camp. Now, when it comes to protective gear, there's really two different directions that you can go in. First off, you can go in like a full body motocross, protective gear, and this is what most guys had. Like a chest protector, back protector, shoulders, and knee pads as well. You can go in that direction. That's what most guys did. The other direction is you can get a really nice motorcycle jacket, and that's the direction that I went with. And so this is the Merlin jacket, and this is actually the one that they recommend in the official Freshline Boot Camp packing list. And so this has some plates back here. It has some flexible protective gear there and in the arms, but nowhere near as much as the official motocross jackets. But this jacket is perfectly fine. It's actually a lot of mesh. This is all mesh, so it breathes very easily. For being in Africa, it never got too hot while you're riding. When you're actually sitting still, it definitely got hot. And so I was pretty happy with this. This thing collects dust like nobody's business, though. Like, there has to be some kind of wax or oil on this thing that all this dust just fucking gets attached right to it. And the instruction says I can't throw it in a washing machine, I can't dry clean it either. So I guess this is part of the overall look now. And so kind of this debate between either getting a jacket that has some padding in there or wearing a full-on motocross protective gear. So the first 2 days we were riding on a motocross track, and I felt a little silly in this big jacket when everybody else is in this motocross gear. But then the rest of the trip, you're on trails, you're on dirt roads. And I actually really preferred having a heavy jacket like that, because if you wipe out going 60 miles per hour on, these dirt roads, all these sharp rocks, I think something like that is going to protect me a lot better just from, road rash than a lot of these guys are in these thin jerseys that they give you and then some selective padding here and there. So the majority of your time you're not going to be on a motocross track. Majority of the time you're going to be out in the wild, out in the bush with really sharp bushes and fucking rocks. And a lot of the guys are getting cut up and everything just from getting too close to the bushes. And so my recommendation actually would be to get like an actual jacket. But just know that the majority of the guys didn't have jackets like that. Majority of them wore very light jerseys and then have these full-on plated protective things. Now I did buy some kind of like some shin guards or knee pads. I actually only wore these one day and then I was like, okay, I don't need these things. I'm a little bit more reckless than I probably should be. And I did have one incident where I kind of fell on this rock pretty hard with my knee and it kind of sucked. And I remember thinking like, fuck, I wish I had that knee pad then. So it is smart to wear these. You don't really need them though. I had a lot of days where I was literally just riding around in t-shirts as well, which is pretty stupid. Like, you shouldn't do that. But you can. They tell you that you have to have all your essential riding gear, essentially your boots and your helmet, with you on the plane when you're traveling to this location, because it's not uncommon for them to lose luggage or luggage to get delayed. And in fact, we had one rider who did not get that memo, and his bags did get lost and did get delayed, and he didn't have any of his riding gear. He essentially had to borrow boots that were 2 sizes too big, and didn't have any of his pads or anything else. So it is pretty important you carry at least your helmet and your boots with you on the plane when you're traveling there. Now that is a huge pain in the neck, and wearing something like this for a 35-hour flight is incredibly uncomfortable and a real pain in the neck. And so what I was actually able to do, I did carry these with me on the plane, but I was able to get some carabiners and a strap. And what I was able to do is actually just attach these to my backpack. So the entire time when I was traveling, I had them on my backpack like that, and I was carrying my helmet separate as well. Still a pain in the neck, but much better than wearing these for 35 hours straight. You know, Africa is probably one of the furthest destinations you can go to from North America, just because you need to go across the Atlantic and then down south. And yeah, it's a real pain in the neck, but I would recommend getting some straps and a carabiner and trying to carry them with you. If anybody makes a big deal about your carry-on luggage being too big, you can always just put the boots on and wear those on that particular flight. I had 3 different flights to get there. Now, on the way back, you don't necessarily need to wear your helmet and your gear, but I only brought 1 bag with me. And I was actually, the instructor PD actually gave me one of his duffel bags so that I could put all my riding gear in here and check this bag on the way home. And so my recommendation would be to get a big duffel bag like this, or military style duffel bag, roll it up, flatten it out, put this in your luggage so that on your way back, you have an extra bag that you can check all your gear, all your riding gear with, for the flight home. And I'm actually really grateful that I did that, because one of my flights, I flew from Windhoek, Namibia to Germany, and then my flight from Germany back to the States got canceled. I ended up spending the night in Germany for my next flight the next day. So it would have been, you know, we're talking about 45 hours or so of traveling to get home. If I had to lug around the helmets and boots the entire time, it just would have really sucked. Having some sort of rechargeable battery is going to be really important on this trip. You actually use this a lot. I would use this to charge my cell phone because I took a lot of pictures and videos. We'd have these little communication devices right here that would attach to our helmets. This takes a USB-C charger, so I would use this to charge that up as well. I had a headlamp which I would use, which was also rechargeable. I'd use this to charge that, and then I had, you know, a GoPro and a 360 camera. I had a lot of camera equipment that I was often recharging, but you definitely want something pretty meaty and something pretty substantial like this, because you're gonna go a couple of days without having an opportunity to charge up any of your gear. And so when you have an opportunity, you have an outlet, you want to charge this thing up and try to charge up as much of your equipment as you can before you go 2-3 days without having access to electricity, because you need your GPS, you need your communication device, you need a headlamp and all this stuff on this trip when you're going. So my recommendation is just make sure you get a nice meaty one. There were several guys that had solar powered battery chargers and none of them worked very well. Even this one has a small solar thing on there. It would take forever just to get any kind of charge. But we had some other guys that had like fold out ones, and they still didn't really work very well. It's a nice little bonus, you know, why not? You can leave it out. Worst case scenario may be helpful, but it's not really necessary. Now, I actually wish that I would have brought a water filter with me. And not that you actually need one, just we are often drinking water out of garden hoses, and the water often tasted like crap. And hydration is really important out there. So they really drill it into you. Drink a lot of water. You always had a Camelback. Make sure you're bringing a lot of water with you. I'd fill up my Camelback and then still have like another liter water bottle I'd bring with me, because you'd go riding bikes and you don't have access to any water other than what you bring for 7-8 hours out of the day. But the water often tasted like crap. And so I wish I would have brought a water filter with me. You can go with something like this, which is a whole water bottle with a filter in it. Not necessarily what you need. There's one guy there had a life straw like this. This is definitely an option as well. You know, you can kind of drink out of it like that. What I actually recommend, what I wish I would have brought, is the Sawyer Mini. And I love this one because it actually threads right onto the lid of a water bottle. So you can fill up all the water bottles you want, and then you can suck the water through this and actually filters the water. And I imagine it would just make it taste a hell of a lot better. Because some of that water was just disgusting. But they said it was potable. Nobody got sick from it or anything like that. But yes, go get yourself a Sawyer Mini. These things are awesome. You can attach right to pretty much any standard plastic water bottle. So I'd also recommend bringing a really good pillow. Not like a crappy camping pillow. Like, just bring a good pillow that, you know, if you had to throw it away, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But sleep was kind of a big issue for me. I slept terrible most of this trip. A lot of the days I'd literally get like 3 hours of sleep. And it's not that we weren't given time to sleep. I just, you know, having a roommate and sleeping in a sleeping bag and an air mattress, you know, when it's 70 degrees, 80 degrees out, whatever it was, I just slept really bad. I was also really sore a lot of the times. And I kind of just wish that I would have just stuffed in there a nice feather pillow that I could have lugged around. And so yeah, I'd recommend bringing like a good pillow with you. Another thing I wish I had was like a rechargeable portable fan of some sort. You know, something that you could charge up off of this as well. Just like a small little fan, because there's often, you know, sometimes we would get like rooms that we could stay in, but oftentimes with no air conditioning whatsoever, and it would get so freaking hot at night. I mean, I remember nights I had no sheets and just laying there like this trying to sleep because I was so freaking hot, and I would have just killed just for a little fan. You know how you get a little white noise out of the thing as well, just for nighttime in particular. I'd also say, you know, you should bring some basic medication, some ibuprofen. You're going to be really sore. There were a couple guys that had diarrhea, so some Tums or some anti-diarrhea medicine may be good. And I'm sure that, you know, PD, the guy putting it this whole thing on, I'm sure he had some like serious medication, but just little things like that. Melatonin to help you sleep at night. Just kind of keep this kind of stuff in mind. Definitely like anti-inflammatory, like ibuprofen. I'd recommend bringing something like that with you. And then also make sure you are in good shape before you go, man. I feel like this thing was a lot more challenging on me because I was not in good shape before I went there. And particularly, you know, your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads. Really focus on those because you're just gonna be riding a lot and it's absolutely exhausting. And what happens is when you get exhausted like that, that's when you start getting sloppy. That's when you can't recover after hitting that rock. You know, that's when you start getting lazy. And so it is kind of dangerous being that exhausted and out of shape, but riding 3 to 6 hours a day every single day. And again, I'm not trying to bash on them because this is preparation for an expedition. If I'm on a 10-day expedition where you're riding 5 hours a day, like you got to be in good shape. And really for me, like my hamstrings and my glutes were freaking killing me. Now I sold my motorcycle and dirt bike like 7 years ago, so I haven't ridden bikes in years. Compared to other guys that ride bikes all the time. So I feel like maybe whatever those little muscles are, maybe they were underdeveloped on me just from not riding so much. But definitely do some squats, some lunges, quite a lot of those to really build up your lower body before you head to boot camp. So look, if you guys want to learn more about Freshline, you can check out their YouTube channel right here. And yeah, I think I'm definitely obligated to go buy myself an adventure bike now and probably make some more content around that, maybe some motorcycle camping videos. So stay tuned for that as well.